I took the GMAT multiple times and scored 700 plus to get into the top business schools, Harvard and Stanford MBA programs. And there's a few things that I've learned about how you can prepare very well for the GMAT exam, which are not really academic related, but are really the pre-academic stage, or really the how can you set your mindset stage before you start preparing for the GMAT, or even during your GMAT prep. I wish I'd known these things before I really got into the weeds of how to do well on the GMAT. Again, if you're new here, my name is Abhinav and I got into both Stanford and Harvard's business schools, and I'm creating content to share with you how you too can make it into one of the top business school programs. The first idea is consistency. When you commit to studying for the GMAT, you commit. You cannot uncommit yourselves, and you cannot just think about, oh, I'm going to study for the GMAT for a few months. If I crack it, sure. If I don't crack it, I'm going to just take a break and then I'm going to reevaluate and revisit it a few months down the line. That's not how it's going to work. Or even if you think that your life is unpredictable, know that GMAT has to be one very consistent thing in that if you really want to ace it. Because you see, the GMAT is not really a test of aptitude. It's a test of stress. It's a test of momentum. It's a test of whether you can continue to do well and persist on one thing regardless of what the outcome is. And so consistency is very important. I remember I took the GMAT multiple times because a few times I was honestly just distracted. I took the GMAT once, I didn't do well. I prepared for a few months, I took it again, I didn't do as well, and then I took it a third time. And what I realized in hindsight is that the reason I had to take it thrice was because of the break in my continuation of taking the GMAT. I practiced for it, I took a break, I practiced for it again, I took a break. And so all of that practice really goes to naught. Because again, the GMAT is not a test of aptitude, it's a test of stress, consistency, and perseverance. That understanding is what really helps me in hindsight when I look at my GMAT prep journey. The second thing is quality over quantity. We're often primed to think that more is better. But for GMAT, I don't think that's true. In hindsight, I consulted many resources: GMAT Club, Magoosh, my own tutors, Target Test Prep, and a host of other LSAT and other variety of questions to help me prepare for my GMAT as well. But was that really useful, or was that just calming my nerves, calming my test anxiety, and helping me just tell a story to myself that, hey, I'm putting in all that I can, I don't know what happens, and if what happens doesn't go in my favor, well, at least I gave it my best. I think it was the latter. And that's because all these resources, the variety of resources that you use, take time away from you for you to determine what truly matters and what is really high quantity. Because you see, the GMAT is again not a test of aptitude. It's a test of whether you can understand what the exam is testing and prepare for exactly that. It's a test of matching your skill set with what the exam actually requires. And so what you really need to do when you study for the GMAT is to make sure that the kinds of questions that you're practicing are truly high value, are truly reflective of how the GMAT people make the GMAT exam, and are in fact testing the concepts or ideas that the GMAT folks want to test. I don't think a lot of test companies, which are third-party companies, are able to prepare you for that. And only the official questions, of course, to an extent they're valuable. I would say they're most reflective of how the actual GMAT would be. And you do need some extra preparation, which is why your tutors would probably guide you. But you need to have this filter or lens on that the more questions you practice doesn't necessarily make you a better GMAT test taker. And you need to realize that to be able to do well on the GMAT. The third thing that I think really helped me in hindsight was having conviction. GMAT is a lot about having self-belief, having the conviction that what you did in the moment was the right thing, having conviction in your preparation, and having conviction in your performance. And that is hard because ultimately the format of the GMAT or GRE or any of these standardized tests is that they reduce your competence quote-unquote competence to a single number. And oftentimes that's not true because our competence is multivariate. It's all over the place. It cannot be just boiled down to a single number on a single day when a lot of other factors which are not in your control go into your performance on test day. So what you really need to have is a lot of conviction in your preparation, in your tutors, in the resources that you have consulted, in the questions that you've practiced, and above all, in the reflection that you've done for each question that you've gotten wrong. And that's also another point regardless. You need to be very reflective in your GMAT journey. If you get a question wrong, it's much better to spend 1 hour thinking about the thought process, the exact steps you took in your brain as to why you got that question wrong, rather than jumping on to the next question. And I understand that thinking about why you got a question wrong is boring and may seem drab and dull and unproductive, but trust me, in hindsight, when I look at my GMAT journey, the more I reflected, the more time I spent on each question that I got wrong, and the less time I spent on doing more questions had an exponential impact on my improvement in the GMAT. So that is something that you really need to be aware of as you prepare for this exam. And the final thing that I would really love to share is having emotional self-regulation. That's a complex idea, but really the core of it is that when you're preparing for the GMAT, a lot of self-talk happens involuntarily. A lot of self-talk happens when you don't realize that it actually is happening. And that's where you need to be very careful in those moments when you're preparing for the GMAT, in those moments when you don't really know where your thoughts are taking you, how well you're performing, how well you're doing on a particular question. In those moments, you need to be very careful about your own emotions and what you're telling to yourself. Are you telling yourself that, hey, I'm a great test taker, I've given everything that I have for this exam and I'm going to ace it? Or are you constantly anxious about what it is that you lack and what it is that you don't have? And I think ultimately, if you have that clarity, that no matter what happens, you will always be positive, optimistic, and even if it's faking it, you will tell yourself that you are doing well and you will continue to do well. I don't think the GMAT preparation without this emotional self-regulation would be successful. Because on test day, it's not just how well you are prepared from a scholastic or aptitude point of view. It's also a matter of how well you can control your anxiety, your emotions, your stress. Because again, the GMAT is testing stress. And that's what you need to understand as you prepare for your GMAT. Because I do think that the things that I've learned about studying and acing the GMAT do apply for GRE, ACT, and the SAT, and many more standardized tests. Share this with someone who's on that journey or anybody who's curious to learn more.